Hello, my friends. Today we will learn about the closure in the JavaScript. Okay, so what's a closure then? First, let's understand the definition, and then we will take a deep dive into the closure. So, a function. What's the closure then? A function which have access to its outer function variable, even out of the lexical scope. So, we will explain this definition step by step. So, to tell you a simple word, the variable in outside the function can be accessed inside the function, inside the inner function, and that the same thing can be done even outside of the lexical scope. That is something the closure. So let's understand the closure step by step. So first we will understand the scope in the JavaScript. So we know when we define a function, let's say function outer, right? Yeah. So we have a function outer. Let's say I'm defining a variable. Let's say let var is equal to hello world. Now we know we can access this variable inside the outer function. Yeah, right. So I can say print test12 in the outer function itself. So I'm just adding comment outer function. So the outer function. Okay, so we can access this test12 in the outer function. Okay, we have mistake. Invoke the outer function. So now we can see the output in the outer function and hello world, right? Right. So now we can say we can access this test_var variable inside the function, but if I try to access that test_var out of the function, let's say here, it's saying test_var is not defined because this function test_var is in a block scope, so we can't access that out of the function, right? So this is about something, this scope. Now let's understand the nesting. So we'll take the same example to understand just nesting. Yeah. So now I'm writing a function, more function over here, function inner, right? So this is a function, and I'm just printing from inner function, right? So to print this message from the inner function, we need to invoke that function. So I'm just invoking it from here, from the outer itself. So we are in outer function. it's a different. We have p to just a printing purpose, so we need to write again and again console.log. Okay, so we are printing p, so a message from the inner function, right? And to print that, we need to invoke the inner function. So I'm doing that from the outer function itself. So I'm invoking the inner function from the outer. Let's run and see. Let me delete this. Okay, so now we can say we have outer function, and inside that we have one inner function inside the outer, and we can access the we can invoke the inner function from the outer function. So like it's kind of nesting. So we have outer function, and inside that we have inner function, right? Now let's say I want, now we know we can't access this test var out of the function, out of the outer function, but we can say, or we can access that test var function, test var variable inside the inner function. Let's test it. Right? We can. So this is a nesting. Now let's come to this third point. Oh, it's not a closure, it's a lexical scope. Lexical scope. Now, what's the lexical scope now? Now we know what's the scope. Now we know what's the nesting scope. Now what's the lexical scope? Okay, now let's understand again by the same example. Now lexical scope is something. Now we are in inner function and we still have access to it outer function. We can say that now it's a global thing. This is the global variable for this function, inner function. So whatever we are writing inside the even we have one more function inside the inner, the level we can say super inner. Even in that case, the test variable will be accessible, right? And even let's say if I add a variable in the global scope, now so global var is accessible from inner function, outer function. So then what's the lexical scope then? Lexical scope is, so we can access all the variables from the inner function to its topmost outer and the global. That's something the lexical scope. Okay, so whatever we declare inside variables in the outer function, we can access that from inner. If even inside the inner, if we have other functions, that function will have access to all variables from the inner and even from the outer, and all the variables from the global scope. Okay, that is something the lexical scope. Okay, now comes to the point. What's then closure then? Now we know we can access the test var, the outer function variable inside the inner function. Yeah, that's common. That's a nesting kind of thing. And then what's the closure then? Yeah, So here we are invoking the function from the outer function. So what we can do now, so when we set closure, so what I'm doing is instead of invoking, let's say I am just returning a return inner. Okay, yeah. So here the one thing to understand is when I was trying to access this test var out of this scope, it was not accessible, right? But it was accessible from. So what does it mean? The inner, the test var variable was not accessible out of the lexical scope, right? So here we are out of the lexical scope of the outer function. So the test var variable was not accessible out of the lexical scope, right? Right? Okay. So now what I can say or what I can do with the help of closure. So now what I'm doing is I'm returning the function from the outer function. So now if I call outer function, what I'll get? The return function inner. Okay, let's try. So let's say I have received inner function, right? I'm calling outer function. Outer function will return me the inner function. Now see the magic here now. Now we know there was a time where we were trying to access the test file out of the outer, but it was not accessible. As we know, we can't access this variable out of the lexical scope, right? But see the magic now. When I'm calling the inner function, let's say, no need to write p, I'm just calling inner function. Now, understand this point. Now we are not inside the lexical scope of the outer function. We are completely out of the lexical scope and out of the outer function, right? Now we are calling the inner function out of the lexical scope. So here we were trying to access the test var which is inside the outer, but it was not accessible. Now we are calling now with the help of this closure concept. Now see the output, right? We are still able to manage calling of the inner function out of the lexical scope, right? And you can note here, you can notice here, test var is still accessible out of the lexical scope. Here I was not able to access the test var variable out of this lexical scope, but with the help of this closure concept, now I have test var out of the lexical scope, right? So this is something closure. So we can access all its lexical scope variables even out of the lexical scope with the help of this closure concept. Now one thing if you have noticed here, in other way we can say test var is a private variable as it is not accessible out of the function or out of the block, but we can access that and manipulate that with the help of this inner function, right? So we can say this is kind of encapsulation concept from the OOPS programming. We can access the private variable. We cannot access private variable directly and edit that but we can access that variables with the help of the functions and change their values. So that's something the encapsulation. I hope I would have cleared your uh, closure concept. So thank you for watching the video.